I want you to just imagine a really stark, minimal visual for a second.
Right.
Just a stark white background. And right in the middle, side by side, are two giant numbers, 107 and 50.
Right. The Lebanon paradox.
Exactly. I mean, let that sit with you for a second, because one ranking reflects reality, and the other ranking is hiding a much deeper truth.
Yeah, it's a profound structural contradiction.
So those numbers. In 2023, Lebanon ranked 107th globally in the overall Human Development Index.
Which is, a pretty severe reality check.
Right. But then in that exact same year, they ranked 50th in the Gender Development Index.
50th out of 194 countries.
Yeah. Beating out dozens of highly stable, wealthy nations in terms of female development. So, okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way.
Thanks for having me.
Today, our mission is to look at this fascinating, honestly kind of terrifying stack of UN data from 1990 to 2023. We're trying to figure out how a country with gender development metrics that are just crushing the global average can experience an epic historical regression in its overall national well-being.
In just 4 years, no less.
Right. 4 years. So we are going to peel back the layers of this development facade. We want to explore the crisis, the hidden resilience, and the structural walls in Lebanon.
To really understand this anomaly, we first need to establish a baseline. Like, what does normal human development look like globally over this 30-year period?
Right, the macro view.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if we look at the macro trajectory of the Global Human Development Index, or HDI, from 1990 to 2023, the story is actually one of steady compounding success.
And just to pause here, for you listening, the HDI isn't just a measure of GDP, right? It's not just money.
No, not at all. It's a composite metric. It measures what people can actually do with their lives.
Yes.
So it combines 3 pillars: a long and healthy life, access to education, and a decent standard of living.
Health, education, income.
Right. And back in 1990, the global HDI average was 0.60,
Okay.
which put humanity in the medium development category.
Okay.
But by 2010, the global score crossed into the high development category at 0.707. And despite a visible dip around 2020 and 2021...
Oh, because of the global pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. COVID-19 and the supply chain shocks. But even with that, the global average bounced back. By 2023, humanity hit a historic peak of 0.756.
So the long-term trend for the world is basically a resilient upward slope.
A very steady upward slope, yeah.
Okay, so that's the global background. Now let's sharply pivot to Lebanon's specific graph, because honestly, it looks completely different.
It really does.
For a long time, Lebanon was steadily climbing. They hit 0.758 in 2011, and they actually peaked at 0.774 in 2018.
And at 0.774, that signifies a highly developed society.
Yeah.
You're talking about robust life expectancy and strong per capita income.
But then, right after 2018, there's this terrifying plunge. It's literally a free fall on the chart. By 2021, the HDI plummeted to 0.733.
Which dragged their global rank down to 105th.
Yeah, and even with a super slow crawl back to 0.752 in 2023, Lebanon effectively lost a decade of development. 10 years of progress just wiped out.
A drop of that magnitude in composite index is catastrophic.
Yeah.
It doesn't just happen from normal economic friction.
So what happened? Let's break down those 3 pillars to figure out the root cause. Health, education, and income.
Well, let's start with income, because that was the fatal blow. The gross national income, or GNI per capita, basically evaporated.
Evaporated is a strong word, but the numbers back it up.
They do. In 2011, Lebanon's GNI per capita was $17,434. By 2021, it had nosedived to roughly $11,088.
Imagine you spent 10 years building a house, and overnight, a financial sinkhole just swallows the entire foundation. That's a drop of over $6,000 per person.
And wealth doesn't just vanish organically. Those red arrows pointing down from 2019, that's not just the pandemic. That is a catastrophic economic and financial meltdown.
Right, because the banking sector basically froze, right?
Exactly. For years, the financial system relied on high interest rates to draw in foreign currency, mostly from the Lebanese diaspora. It was a mechanism to keep the local currency pegged to the U.S. dollar.
But when that influx of dollars stopped,
The whole system seized up. Confidence vanished. The local currency, the lira, lost over 90% of its value. So people's life savings were effectively vaporized.
which brings us to the health pillar. Because you can't have a currency collapse without the health infrastructure collapsing too.
No, they are entirely linked. Life expectancy crashed from 78.2 years in 2019 to just 73.6 years in 2021.
A 5-year drop in life expectancy in a 2-year window? That's insane.
Health outcomes don't drop by 5 years just from a virus. They drop when hospitals can't afford diesel for their generators, or when they can't import specialized medicines because the currency is worthless.
And when all the doctors and nurses are leaving the country because their salaries are suddenly paying for nothing.
Exactly. But here's where the data gets weird. We have income collapsing, we have health crashing, but then we look at the third pillar, education.
Right.
And education stayed incredibly flat.
Yeah.
Expected years of schooling hovered right around 11.6 to 12 years through this whole crisis.
So what does this all mean? Like, if education stays stable but the other two pillars collapse, what is happening on the ground?
It shows that in a highly volatile environment, education becomes the ultimate unseizable asset. You can lose your money in a bank collapse, but you can't lose your degree.
It's an exportable asset. It's an escape hatch.
Precisely.
Hmm.
The population aggressively prioritized schooling because it's the only way out.
I want to pause here to just relate this back to you, the listener. It is a crazy reminder of how fragile progress actually is. A high HDI isn't permanent. Without economic stability, it vanishes in a blink.
It really does.
Mm.
And that resilience in education leads us perfectly to the Gender Development Index, the GDI. This is Lebanon's honor student dimension.
Right, the 50th rank we talked about at the start. So the global GDI for 2023 is 0.955, and Lebanon just crushes this with a 0.992.
Which is phenomenal. And what's fascinating here is what is driving that score. It is purely education.
Yeah, the data shows this stunning gender flip. The mean years of schooling for women is 13.05 years, but for men, it's only 9.13 years.
Women are drastically outpacing men. Plus, over 64% of adult women have some secondary education, keeping pace with the men.
So in an economy that is literally imploding, Lebanese women are aggressively pursuing education.
They've essentially maxed out their development potential within the severe constraints of their country.
Okay, but this brings up a huge analogy for me. It's like Lebanon has built a generation of elite, highly trained athletes, but they are playing in a stadium with no doors to let them on the field.
That is a very accurate way to visualize it.
Because if women are so incredibly educated, why isn't this translating to the overall HDI? Why aren't they rescuing the economy?
And that question takes us to the dark side of this paradox. We have to look at the Gender Inequality Index, or the GII.
Right, so GII measures potential, but GII measures something else.
Yes. The GII measures resource acquisition and structural participation. Basically, how much power do these educated women actually have in society?
And the data reveal here is brutal. Lebanon's 2023 GII score is 0.360. That ranks them a dismal 95th globally.
Picture a giant funnel, or like a leaky pipeline graphic. You have this massive input of highly educated women at the top, but only a tiny trickle of actual empowerment coming out the bottom.
Let's talk about the unscalable walls causing that leak, starting with the labor market.
Right. Looking at 2023, male labor force participation is robust. It's at 70.27%,
But female participation is stuck at 30.45%, less than half,
even though they have 4 more years of education on average.
which proves this is a structural barrier. And it gets even worse when you look at the political glass ceiling, the parliament seats.
The legislative distribution is heavily skewed. Men hold 93.75% of the seats,
And women hold a mere 6.25%.
which is drastically lower than the global average of roughly 26.5%.
We have to be impartial here and just present this strictly as a data point. It reflects the structural makeup of the society, specifically the confessional system.
Exactly. The political system is built on a power-sharing agreement among recognized religious sects. And while that was designed for post-war stability, an empirical byproduct is that it heavily entrenches traditional patriarchal leadership.
Right, we aren't endorsing or taking a side on their domestic governance, but the numbers show what they show. It naturally blocks new, diverse entrants, including women.
It absolutely does. The friction between the GDI and the GII is this hidden structural barrier. Women have achieved personal development, but they are locked out of societal power.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, just from a pure macroeconomics perspective.
Mhm.
Think about the sheer economic waste this represents.
Oh, it is massive inefficiency.
You have an economy that just watched its gross national income get cut in half, and your most educated demographic is structurally sitting on the sidelines.
It's not just a social issue at that point.
Exactly. It's a macroeconomic disaster. Think about your own workplace or community, for you listening. Imagine if the most educated 50% of your talent pool was prevented from contributing. How fast would your organization collapse in a crisis?
It would fail almost immediately. And that systemic failure leads us to the hidden adjustments in the UN data, specifically the IHDI and the PHDI.
Oh man, the acronyms. Let's start with the IHDI. The Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index.
So globally, the HDI loses about 21.96% of its value when you adjust it for inequality, because averages can hide deep systemic rot.
Right, if one guy has $1 billion and 9 guys have zero, the average looks okay, but the reality is bleak.
Exactly. And in Lebanon, the IHDA loss is driven by some very specific pain points. There's a 10.94% loss due to life expectancy inequality.
But the big one is income, a massive 20.24% loss due to income inequality.
Because when the gross national income collapsed, it did not collapse evenly.
The poorest bore the absolute brunt of the crisis. While some elites could move their capital or stay insulated in a dollarized cash economy, the middle class was wiped out.
The poorest suffered the most profound loss of well-being. But then we look at the PHDI, which is the Planetary Pressures Adjusted HDI. And there's a massive twist in the data here.
Yeah, this one threw me for a loop. So Lebanon's PHDI rank is 73rd, which is 34 spots higher than its standard HDI rank of 107.
Their PHDI loss is only 8.11%, which is actually better than the global average loss of 10.05%.
And their per capita CO2 emissions are really low, just 3.64 tons. So wait, is Lebanon actually super green and sustainable? Is this like an environmental victory?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Hmm.
no. It's what we call the illusion of sustainability.
Be a mirage in the spreadsheet.
Exactly. Lebanon isn't ranking high because they successfully transitioned to a thriving green economy. They didn't build wind farms. They rank high because their economic activity, manufacturing, and consumption severely contracted.
Ah, a stalled economy doesn't produce as much carbon.
Right. It's a green advantage born from trauma, not innovation. The power grid fails, so the state isn't burning fuel. People can't afford to drive or consume.
Wow. So to visualize all of this, picture a 6-axis radar chart. On one side, you have this potential zone bulging outward. That's the high education and the superficially good carbon footprint.
But on the other side, the crisis zone is violently caved in, income is crushed, and political participation is basically zero.
It's just such a broken engine. Which brings us to the final module of the data, synthesizing all of this into a blueprint for the future.
Right, because data isn't just a post-mortem. It gives us data-driven policy recommendations to rebuild Lebanon's development engine.
The source outlines 4 main pillars. Let's hit the first one, economic activation.
This is baseline triage. You need structural reforms to stop the HDI freefall and restore baseline national income. You have to stabilize the currency and the banks.
Stop the bleeding. Got it. Pillar 2, unlocking female productivity.
This is huge. You have to convert that highest quality resource, the highly educated women, into active labor. Supporting female entrepreneurship and employment isn't just a social good anymore.
It's the most obvious economic life raft. You have this massive pool of talent. Let them work.
But you can't do that without the third pillar, political quota reform.
Right, breaking that 93% male monopoly in parliament.
You need to introduce new perspectives in crisis management. If the current system naturally blocks diverse problem solvers, you have to reform the quotas to get them into the room.
And finally, the 4th pillar, resilience investment.
This means taking that accidental low-carbon footprint and turning it into a deliberate green economy. Overtake on the curve during the recovery, build decentralized solar instead of going back to expensive fossil fuels.
Love that phrase, overtake on the curve. But none of these are isolated solutions, are they?
Not at all. You cannot fix the economic crisis without unlocking the female labor force. And you cannot unlock that labor force without altering the political decision-making structure.
It's all connected. It's a map. And for you listening, I really encourage you to view data this way. It's not just a report card. It shows you exactly where the engine is broken, but also where the untapped fuel is stored.
It really does.
Thank you so much for going on this deep dive with us today into the shadows and opportunities behind Lebanon's complex data profile.
It's a heavy topic, but an important one.
Development is never a straight line, you know? It's a constant battle against structural fragility.
And I want to leave the listener with a final kind of lingering question to mull over.
Oh, go for it.
When a country produces a generation of highly educated, highly capable women, but provides them with no structural path to power or economic contribution, what happens to that potential?
Yeah, where does that energy go?
Does it eventually trigger an irreversible brain drain as they leave for foreign shores?
Hmm.
Or does the sheer pressure of that untapped potential eventually crack the glass ceiling and force a societal revolution?
Man, that is the question. The data shows the pressure, but it doesn't tell us when the valve is going to pop. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Keep questioning the numbers and keep looking for the stories hidden inside the data. We'll see you next time.